Hello. I am Clipfish, your host. Welcome to the third board, my master's chess channel. In today's video, I shall show you an interesting game, played between the Czech Grandmaster Oldrich Duras, and the Cuban Grandmaster José Raul Capablanca in 1913, New York. This video is part 1. After an intense middle game, with possibilities for both players, Capablanca wins a pawn, and the position becomes a rook endgame. Rook endgames are notoriously difficult, and draws are very common. Will Capablanca be able to convert that little material advantage in victory? Well, if you are a Capablanca fan like my master, you already know the answer. Let's start the game. Duras is white and starts with pawn to d4. Capablanca plays pawn to d5. And after knight f3, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, d takes on c4. We have the Queen's Gambit accepted by transposition. The game continues with e3, a6, bishop takes on c4, b5, bishop d3, bishop b7, a4. In this position, it is common for white to play queen c2, preparing the advance of the king's pawn to e4. Back to the game. Black plays b4, knight b1. Retreating the knight to a2 is also possible. And, after the queen's bishop goes to d2, the knight can be transferred to b3 via c1. The game continues with c5, castles, knight c6, d takes on c5. White gives up the center. Perhaps Duras was afraid of a possible isolated pawn on d4, if black decides to take on d4. The game continues with bishop takes on c5, queen e2, queen d5, rook d1, aligning the rook with the black queen, queen h5, transferring the queen to the king side, knight from b to d2, knight a5. With this knight move, Capablanca stops the white knight from going to the b3 square. White plays knight f1. Duras will move his knight to the king side. The game continues with castles, knight g3, attacking the queen, queen g4, e4, knight b3, attacking the rook, rook b1, rook from f to d8. Instead of this rook move, an impetuous attacker could have moved pawn to h5. White cannot play pawn to h3, in order to stop further advance of the black pawn to h4, because the g3 knight would fall. Capablanca, however, prefers to bring the rook into play. Until this move, Stockfish evaluated the position as equal. However, the engine considers that black's move is inferior, and now white is better. Instead of rook from f to d8, Stockfish suggests knight to d4 for black. And after that the game could have continued like this. Knight takes knight. Bishop takes knight. Queen f3. Bishop e5. Queen takes queen. Knight takes on g4. And the position would be equal. Back to the game. White plays Bishop e3. Duras offers the e4 pawn as sacrifice, which will lead to a series of exchanges. Black plays Knight takes on e4. Capablanca accepts the pawn, but, according to Stockfish, this move weakens black even more. Knight to d4 is better. The game continues with Bishop c2, threatening the knight. Bishop takes on e3. Queen takes on e3. White does not take the knight on b3 with the bishop, because of the following continuation. Bishop takes on f2 check. King to h1, or to f1. Bishop takes on g3. And black's bishop cannot be taken, because of the threat of knight fork on g3, winning the queen. Back to the game. Black plays knight from b to c5. Stockfish considers this move a mistake. It allows white a combination that wins a piece. Instead of knight to c5, it was better to play rook takes on d1. Back to the game. White plays h3. According to the engine, this was another mistake. This time because white apparently did not notice the winning combination. However, Stockfish still considers the position favorable to white. Instead of h3, the engine recommends rook takes on d8 check for white. And after that, the game could have continued with rook takes on d8. Bishop takes on e4. Bishop takes on e4. Here, if black takes the e4 bishop with the knight, white would play queen b6, threatening the b7 bishop and the rook. And black would be in a very uncomfortable situation. Continuing the sequence. Rook c1. Threatening the knight twice, and this knight is defending the bishop. Bishop takes on f3. G takes on f3. Now, the pawn attacks the queen. Queen d4. Retreating the queen, but the knight is already lost. Queen takes on d4. Rook takes on d4. Rook takes on c5. h6. Duras would have a piece for a pawn, and his position would be better. Back to the game. Black plays Queen g6. Knight takes on e4. Rook takes on d1 check. Rook takes on d1. Bishop takes on e4. Bishop takes on e4. Knight takes on e4. Queen d4. White does a double attack, threatening the b4 pawn, and mate in 2 in black's back rank. This way, Duras takes back the sacrificed pawn. However, according to Stockfish, until this move, Duras, who was better in the game, now concedes equality to Capablanca. It was better for white to play queen a7. Observe that the queen cannot be taken, because of mate threat in black's back rank. After that, the game could have continued like this. Rook f8. Queen takes on a6. Knight c5. Queen a5. Knight d3. Knight e5. Knight takes on e5. Queen takes on e5. h6. And white would be slightly better. Back to the game. Black plays h6. Queen takes on b4. Knight f6. Queen b7. Attacking the rook. Queen e4. Defending the rook. Queen takes on e4. Knight takes on e4. b4. By moving the b-pawn, Duras did an unfortunate mistake. It was better to move the rook to d4. Black plays knight c3. Now black's knight does a fork, threatening the rook and the a4 pawn. This pawn will fall eventually. White plays rook d3. The a4 pawn cannot be defended. To move the rook to a1 would bring no benefit. The game would have continued like this. Rook b8. Rook a3. Knight d5. And black would win a pawn anyway. Back to the game. Black plays knight takes on a4. Rook a3. Knight b6. Knight e5. King f8. Knight d3. Knight d5. Rook a4. Rook b8. Rook takes on a6. Knight takes on b4. Knight takes on b4. Rook takes on b4. Rook a7. And, finally, we arrived at the most interesting position of the game. Capablanca has material advantage of one pawn, but the game has turned into a rook ending. And, as I said before, rook endings are notoriously difficult. In Capablanca's case, all the pawns are in one side of the board, and because of this, drawing possibilities are even higher. Stockfish 12 considers this position almost equal. According to the engine, the evaluation is -0.64, or a little more than half a pawn for black. Black needs a good plan to convert this little advantage in a win. And, of course, a correct execution is also necessary. If you have the black pieces, what would be your plan? Did you like this game so far? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want notifications of more content like this, please subscribe to this channel. I shall narrate this game's conclusion in the next video. Thank you, and see you again in part 2. Goodbye.